I became fixated, totally focused on this idea of becoming the first person in history to run all the way across the Sahara. And I spent a year and a half planning, training, basically writing what amounts to a business plan and budgets. And I get guys like Matt Damon and the director James Mall involved in this project.
Welcome, high-performing entrepreneurs and business owners. Do you suffer from shiny object syndrome? Do you often feel scattered and distracted, making it hard to implement your plan with all the ideas and strategies coming at you? Do you often wonder if you have the right goals and plan? Welcome to Extraordinary Focus with David Wood, where we help you achieve way more in less time. Get the laser focus you need so you can double your business, double your impact in the world, and be an even more extraordinary entrepreneur and human. Let's dive in and stay tuned at the end for your gift. Welcome everybody to another episode of Extraordinary Focus. And boy, you know, we often say, and podcast hosts are saying, oh, I've got an exciting guest. I'm really excited for this episode. It happens to be true for this one. I'm going to read his bio and then we'll get him out here. Charlie Engle is one of the premier adventure athletes in the world today. I'm talking world class. He's run across more than 40 countries. And when he says that, he probably means from one side of the country to the other side of the country. But by far his most important accomplishment is his 29 years of clean and sober living. He's the best-selling author of Running Man. And his record-setting run across the Sahara Desert, and we're going to get into that, led to the creation of H2O Africa, which is known today as water.org, co-founded by Matt Damon. Charlie's been a featured speaker at the United Nations, at NATO headquarters in Belgium, and on board the USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier. I'm so jealous as a speaker. He regularly trains Fortune 500 companies in strategies for resilience and addressing mental health issues. Let's get him out here. Welcome, Charlie Engle.
Man, thanks, David. I appreciate that. Great intro.
Hey, you're welcome. It was easy to give. You and I met at Camp Maverick, hosted by Yannick Silva. We were both speakers there, and I watched your speech. I think you may have seen my speech
yours too
as well. Yeah. And so, what a great way to get to know each other, right? Seeing us speak, and I thought this is a dude I could hang out with. And I stalked you for a while. It wasn't easy. It took me 2 years, I think, to track you down. And now I've got your cell and we're connected, but universal timing, huh?
It's true. It's true. Well, I loved meeting you there, and I will admit to being elusive sometimes when it's never on purpose. But I'm glad we're connected now, and I love what you're doing, and I got a chance to listen to a few podcasts, and I dig what you're doing. So let's have some fun.
Yeah. Well, it must be hard to reach you because you're always running in a desert somewhere. You probably don't have cell reception for that.
You know, people don't realize how wonderful it is to disconnect, and I love to get off the grid as much as possible.
Yeah. So I think one possible theme for this episode is I'm interested in how we can take your ability to focus, your ability to choose something difficult and to stick beyond where most humans ever have. And I don't just mean of people who are alive now, but ever in history. So we've got stories, you've got stories to tell, and I want to pull out the nuggets so that all listeners can go, all right, I can apply that. I can do that. If Charlie can do this, I can achieve my big goal. Let's talk about the Sahara run, because I did go and watch your documentary. What's the name of it?
It's called Running the Sahara.
Running the Sahara. I went and watched it, and I highly recommend watching it, guys. You didn't just run a marathon. See, that for most people would say, oh, I want to run a marathon. That's their target. If my memory serves me, you ran a marathon in the desert. So that's a degree of difficulty, 9.6, I imagine. And then
straight after it, you did another one. Like, you know, okay, I've done a marathon. Let me just roll it over and we're going to do 2 marathons. And then after that, you did another marathon. And I'm not talking with 5 days break. These are consecutive. How many marathons did you run consecutively to get yourself across the Sahara?
Yeah, it turns out Africa's pretty big. I should have probably checked the maps a little more closely before I went, but I ran 2 marathons every day for 111 consecutive days without taking a day off.
I am swearing in my head, but I want this available to everyone, so I'm holding back. I want to say, holy fudgesicle, you did 2 marathons a day, which I imagine most people haven't done. You did it in the desert, and you did it 111 days straight. So is that 222 marathons?
Yes. Yeah, nobody ever said I was all that bright, David. You met me in person a couple of years ago, and apparently I left you thinking that, maybe I was intelligent, but clearly my intelligence has its limits.
Well, I trust that there's a reason that you run and that it works for you. And I imagine it supports your sobriety as well, which we'll get into a little bit later on. Yeah. So watch Running the Sahara. I just watched, I know your feet were blistered. Your body was kind of falling apart and you just kept on going. Now, this is not to say everyone should go and do that. Has anyone done that before?
No, and not since. And given the current political situation in the Sahara, it's unlikely that, anytime in the near future that it could be done. So it's
right, because you had to go through several countries, right?
Yeah, I mean, we went through Senegal and Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Libya, and Egypt, and unfortunately, the entire center of the Sahara, Mali, Niger, and Libya, are a real mess these days, and just not easy to get to, and certainly not easy to spend time there. So
wow. So it's almost the metaphor for me is like you left the solar system to go to another one, and now no one else can do it. So no one's going to knock you off the pedestal. I imagine there's a Guinness Book of Record somewhere in there, if not more than one.
Yeah, there's a bunch of records there, and it was an amazing time, and I'm excited, given the focus of your podcast, to talk about the focus that it takes and what is involved in doing something like that. Because while most people won't run across the Sahara, I would argue that starting a business or starting a family they're very similar things. They're these long expeditions that you have to prepare for.
Yeah, well, let's make it real. I was just thinking, what am I committing to recently that's a challenge and could be a long slog, and it's an acting career. So while I'm coaching and training whatever on the side, I moved myself to Hollywood, and here I am studying and doing that. So this will be great for me. We can make it real. What are some tips or principles, some nuggets that people can take away that they can apply to something scary that they're doing, like starting a new business?
Sure. So, I think back as you were talking about where I was in my life when I went to the Sahara, and I was 12 or 13 years clean and sober at that point. And, my 20s had been a mess, and life was heading in the right direction. I was the senior producer for a show called Extreme Makeover Home Edition on ABC, which was just it's another weird story that's in my book and all of that. But like, I've got this great job. Someone said I'm a top runner around the world, but someone says to me this idea of, I wonder if anyone's ever run all the way across the Sahara Desert. And I became fixated, totally focused on this idea of becoming the first person in history to run all the way across the Sahara. And I spent a year and a half planning, training, basically writing what amounts to a business plan and budgets. And I get guys like Matt Damon and the director, James Mall, involved in this project. And, I've got everything written out. We've got the budget. It's all set to go. And, everybody's so excited, and we're getting ready to start this thing back in late 2006. And I'm looking at everyone around me and thinking to myself, I've suckered all of these people out to the Sahara Desert, and we're all going to die because I still didn't know what I was doing. Like I convinced people of the adventure, but deep inside I didn't have the confidence yet that I knew what I was doing. And the expedition began, and sure enough, within 7 days, it completely disintegrated. It's 140 degrees ground temperature every day. We run out of food and water, support people quit, cars blow up. My two co-runners are on IV drip every day because they're so dehydrated, and like the expedition's completely fallen apart. So the nugget here is I recognized that I was going about it all wrong. I was completely focused on the outcome. From the beginning, my only concern was getting to the end. And because I felt a lot of pressure, there was a lot of money invested, a lot of people were watching this thing, and I felt like this will be, such a failure if I can't make it all the way across. But how do you make it all the way across? Well, by focusing on the miles that you can run today. That is the only way. It's the same lesson you learn in addiction recovery. Everybody knows the mantra, one day at a time. Well, cliches are there for a reason. There usually is a lot of truth in them. And so we've disintegrated in the desert. And on day 8, I wake up and I'm like, okay, screw it. I can only focus on what's right in front of me. I can't control whether the Libyan government lets me into their country or whether we make it all the way to the Red Sea. I can't control any of that. What I can control is running these miles today, the ones that are right in front of me. And if I get to run those, if I do that, I get to do it again tomorrow. And slowly but surely, I focused on that. And we, in one day at a time, we started to make our way across the desert. And mentally, I started to enjoy even the hardship of every single day instead of feeling the stress of, oh my God, am I going to make it? Because not only does that suck the joy out of your daily existence, am I going to, make it to this far off goal? But it usually works against you in the actual achievement of the goal.
Wow. So you heard it here, listeners. We're dusting off some of the old cliches because they're cliches for a reason, and we're giving them their due. Sure, you do the planning so you know where you're headed, but if you keep staying fixated on that, you're going to be miserable. So one day at a time. I found myself in the last couple of weeks when I've really felt myself struggling singing that song, one day at a time, sweet Jesus. And it's helped. It's just, all right. And I've been also using the cliche, the expression, moving the ball further down the field. That's what I can do. I can't control the goal, but I can move the ball further down the field every day. And it gives me some peace. Did you get to meet Matt Damon? I'm an actor now, so I got to ask you, did you get to meet him, or was it all virtual?
No, the first time I met Matt was actually when we agreed in principle to do this project together.
And he narrated it. Did he narrate that?
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
Wow.
Yeah. So we agreed to do this project, and I got to meet him in New York City, and in typical Matt fashion, which was great. We met and went for a run because he's actually a really good athlete, and I think he, it was the appropriate way for us to get to know each other. So we take a 10-mile run through Manhattan, and it was I still laugh about the run itself because he's wearing a ball cap, and I watched people for an hour and a half like recognize him, but then we're past them. And so it's like Matt Damon, people yelling down the street because they realize who they've just seen. Anyway,
What a smart way for him to get out in public. because
Yeah.
people are gotta sprint to catch up with
Nobody,
him.
yeah, the
And if
average
he
person wasn't going to catch him.
and if he runs away, it doesn't look awkward because he's already running.
Yeah.
Did he tell you, does he ever get a group of people actually jogging and trying to catch up?
Oh yeah. Yeah, every once in a while. But he's a good, again, he's a good athlete. There's a reason you don't see Matt, in the tabloids and that kind of nonsense, because he really just steers clear of it. And he's a genuinely good guy. Got to spend a lot of time around him. And him taking on this project, changed my life. But he actually said, I write about this in the book, and it gets brought, but for people who read the book, it gets brought up a lot. And I think it's again, for your audience, it might be a fun little piece of info. Matt and I run 10 miles. We finished this run. He's quite winded. I mean, we're not running fast, we're running fairly, whatever, but like, we finish it. He's kind of bent over and he's like, I don't, like, that's it for me. I said, I can't run any farther than 10 miles. Like, that's the most I could ever do. And I had never thought about this, but I literally said to him the words. I said, well, Matt, you just have to change your relationship to pain. And it's funny, he ends up 2 years later on the stage at the Toronto Film Festival where we launched the film. He ends up quoting that quote back to me as he's introducing the film. And and he said it really changed everything for him, because he recognized that his own mental limitations were set about how far he could run or what he could
Wow.
do. And we have to change our relationship to pain. And pain doesn't have to be physical pain, like
Right.
ouch pain, as comes in all forms. And
Yeah.
and I think it helped him, and his acknowledgement of that helped me.
I love it. It's so simple and powerful. So I'm applying it to the acting career. I need to change my relationship to hearing no from auditions, or doing 100 auditions and never hearing a thing. That's the key, right? So instead of it being painful, it's like the mindset I've been using here is that audition is my stage. That's my acting right there. If they like it, I'll do more. If they don't, okay, fine, I'll do the next audition. And every one is a different role. And as you said, focusing on today, what can I do today?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
gift. I mean, it really is. It is. I would point out one other thing that about the Sahara that I think most of us can relate to, and that is um, this idea of focus. It is the name of what you do. It's rare in today's world that we go through a day where we're singularly focused on one thing. It's rare we go through 5 minutes where we're singularly focused. You're picking up your phone, you're answering texts and emails, and there's 20 things going on. Oh, there's an alert from the newspaper that I like, and like, here, oh, this piece of news. Like, we're constantly bombarded. What happened for me in the Sahara is I got the gift of running basically 12 hours a day through the desert. And the only thing I was even capable of focusing on was the steps that were right in front of me. And so I
Wow.
do highly encourage everyone. It doesn't have to be running, but if it's your acting, if you're a writer, if you're an artist, whatever that is, or an athlete, like, I know it's hard to do, but like, literally shut off the phone, put it in a drawer. Like, you can put the little notice on there that says, I'm going to be unavailable today. The world will be fine without you for 24 hours. Like,
Right.
and like, just give yourself the gift of being singularly focused on what it is that you're doing for whatever period of time you're comfortable doing it. And man, it's life changing.
I love that. You heard it here, listeners. What would it be like to give yourself the gift of being singularly focused? And just imagine if you did one thing in a day. There was just one task that you focused on. Charlie, when I was writing my first book, Get Paid for Who You Are, it wasn't really happening. And what I realized later, well, I'll get to that. It wasn't really happening. and I had some tension in my body. I didn't even know it, but my brain said, this is the most important thing in your life right now. And I wasn't focused on it. So I decided, all right, for 2 weeks until 4 p.m., I'm not allowed to touch anything that isn't book. And I had a roommate. I even decided I will not speak. She could speak to me, but she understood I wasn't going to speak back. I'm just, focus. And it was one of the most relaxed, fulfilling periods of my life because I was in integrity. And that's what I realized later on. I wasn't in integrity with what mattered most. So I love what you're throwing down here. Let me ask you about sobriety. I want to go back because I'm thinking, and for listeners, maybe you don't have 6 beers a day, and maybe you don't relate or identify as an alcoholic of some kind. But as we talk about sobriety, I want you to think about, where are you not sober? Is it sugar that you rely on? Is it weed? Is it maybe you have 2 drinks a day, but it's every day? What are your crutches? Is it television? Is it video games? What might you want to get sober from? Charlie, how was life different before you got sober?
Wow, you just said so much, and I'm grateful for the question. It is what popped into my head as you listed off those things is, how does this thing serve you? Like, how is it helping you, whether it's sugar or alcohol or television? And look, I acknowledge we all need some escape. We all need something, whether, you could categorize even reading in there, right? I mean, there's escape that we all need from day-to-day things. But if that escape is a truly unhealthy thing, like drinking or drugs or sugar, and you find that you're incapable of managing it, of controlling it, then that's something that needs to be, looked at. And for me, it was primarily, it was my 20s. I spent 10 years as a, I guess you'd call me a high achieving drunk and a drug addict. And my attitude was, if I could be the top salesperson, if I could run the company, if I could get married, buy a house, have kids, then clearly I couldn't be an addict, right? Because addicts don't do those things, right?
Wow.
And of course addicts do all those things. And for me, I was every single day desperate to balance my bad behavior with overachieving behavior. And if I could do that, it justified this crazy life I was leading. And finally, and inevitably, as it does for everybody, that all fell apart, and eventually the boss does fire the top salesperson. Eventually the wife does leave the guy who, just can't stop drinking. And the things that had never happened yet is a big word, all they began to start happening for me. And when things crumbled, what I realized, David, I think this is an important point for your listeners, is I came to the recognition that my addiction was a superpower, actually. You cannot get good at anything without periods of obsession. We were just kind of talking about that. Like, there has to be times where the only thing that you're thinking of when your head hits the pillow at night is this goal. And the only thing you're thinking of is that goal first thing in the morning when you wake up. And there has to be periods of obsession to master a craft or a goal, whatever that happens to be. But if it's in the consumption of all the rest of your life, then that's unhealthy. And it took me a lot of years to realize that I didn't need to get rid of my addictive nature or my obsessive qualities, but what I had to do was point those passions and addictions and obsessions towards things that were positive. That could, one was my sobriety. Another was something like water.org, where, there's millions of people that get clean water today because I had the fairly insane idea that running across the Sahara Desert could amount to anything. And it's like I said, we attach outcomes. We want to know what this effort is going to get us in the long run. And that's so limiting because it stops us from doing today's work and getting today's lessons and blessings and the things that come out of it without the promise of there being anything further down the road. And that's where we live, is right now. We don't live in that distant place.
Charlie, there's so much that I want to say in response to that. Firstly, this is interesting timing that you and I are connecting now. I've been relying on crutches for quite some time, coping mechanisms. During the pandemic, I started smoking weed to help me sleep at night. A doctor friend of mine said, cannabis is great for anything neurological. I'm like, okay. So I tried it and it helped. Then I started smoking earlier in the evening to feel relaxed. And now it's been like 2.5 years and it's a habit.
Yeah.
And and I'm clear on all my crutches. I was watching TV 3 hours a night and, and playing some video games and things like that. And the timing's fascinating. Firstly, I had an insight in the last 2 weeks that my high performance is a smokescreen. That yes, I achieve all these wonderful things, and therefore no one says to me, "Hey, you've got an issue here." What would life be like if you were able to wean yourself off those crutches and live more cleanly? What could be possible? No one would do that, including myself, because I'm achieving so much. So it was great to hear you say, yeah, a lot of addicts are very high functioning. And I just hired a coach recently, actually hired my ex-girlfriend as my coach. And I have not smoked weed now for 15 days straight. And I'm doing 40 days. Apparently it's called a sadhana, where you do a new habit for 40 days, apply some pressure and see what happens and what grows. And, I applied that, and then I limited TV to an hour a night, and I'm not watching the negative violent stuff, and then not eating after 8 o'clock, which was very difficult when you're high on weed. So all of these things I'm bringing in and habit stacking. So it's just fascinating timing that you have shown up. Plus I have a client just popped into my field, a new client a couple of weeks ago, and he wants to get off opiates. And so I'm supporting him in that journey. So I'll give him a shout out because I'm going to have him watch this. Shout out to Mr. F. I acknowledge your courage in creating a better life for yourself, a better version of you, so you can find out what's beyond addiction.
Well, David, you said so much there, and I congratulate you and admire you for taking the steps, yes, but really for sharing it with other people is the more important piece, because I think you and I are similar in that, and most people are this way. We think if people knew our what we consider to be our weaknesses,
Yeah.
that somehow they wouldn't admire us, they wouldn't respect us, they wouldn't whatever. You know what? Nobody cares. Nobody. I don't mean people don't care about us, but we as human beings care about our stuff more than we care about anybody else's. That's human nature. So the more I share my struggle with other people, past struggles, current struggles, the more they are likely to actually pull for me and want things to be, better. And everyone relates to struggle. Almost nobody relates to success, because it's an elusive, what does that even mean?
Right. So many, I imagine every listener's got something in their life that they'd like to change. They'd like to exercise more. They'd like to cut down TV. They'd like to spend more time with their kids. Creating new habits and getting away from the old ones is not easy. If it was, there wouldn't be coaches. There wouldn't be therapists. We really need that support. And so I'm hoping listeners are like, you know what? What's a thing that I want to change that'll support myself? Maybe I would cut out alcohol for 40 days. Do it. Take it on. If you need a support structure, find a support structure. I wanted to share this with you. I used to think that people who went to AA meetings were weak. I used to think, oh, those people just don't know how to handle their life, and any alcoholic is just weak. Well, Byron Katie, I went and spent a month with her, and every day she'd throw us in a bus and send us to an AA meeting or an NA meeting or an Overeaters Anonymous or whatever. And after the 5th meeting, I kept thinking, why am I here? Why am I here? After the fifth meeting, every one of us on the bus identified as an addict of some kind, even if it was thinking or sex or relationship or TV. And I got that those people at those meetings were some of the strongest people in the world, because they were getting sober or getting off whatever crutch they had. They were reaching out for support, and they had the courage to say, how many miles can I run today?
Yeah, well, look at where we are right now. I mean, after these years of COVID, uh, the lack of community and fellowship. I mean, all those things really suffered these last couple of years because we lost contact. I mean, with our neighbors, much less all the people out there in the world. And you know, AA and NA and any of those, structured programs, they aren't about quitting drinking or drugs. I mean, lots of people do actually manage to quit drinking or to quit doing drugs like on their own, so to speak. Excuse me. But it's not the drugs or the drinking is the symptom. It's not the underlying trauma. It's not the cause of why you're doing it. It's the outward expression of those inner feelings. And so sure, you can eliminate the drinking, but if you did it on your own, like on a desert island, you'd still be probably pretty miserable. And it's the community. I'm lucky. I have a recovery community, and by community, what I mean is really the simplest thing. If I don't show up for a couple of days, someone reaches out to me and says, "Hey, man, I hadn't seen you for a bit. What's going on?" And like, I don't if that's a virtual meeting, if it's a in-person meeting, but I also have the running community. I'm also vegan for over 20 years. So I have these interesting communities where people actually care about me. They know me. And if I don't make an appearance, like if I don't show up just as a person in the meeting, someone's going to reach out and say, "Is everything okay?" And like that to me is the definition of what a supportive recovery community is. We can spend, man, we get all of us get a little too caught up sometimes. Trauma therapy is incredibly important, and getting to the root cause of things absolutely is important. But you know what? The only day you can actually live is the one right in front of you. And
Would
so, you gotta focus on being healthy today, and eventually you'll get to a place where you can examine maybe how you got to that place. But so much attention is focused on, getting to the root causes. I got to tell you, man, getting to the root cause of something never actually helped me get past it.
would you say that, this just popped into my head, would you say that one of the major reasons and causes of crutches and bad habits and addictions is lack of connection?
100%. If you talk to Deepak, so I work with Deepak Chopra on a program called Freedom from Addiction, and Deepak is the master at this. We've known each other for a long time, and he talks about human connection being the core necessity of just being alive. And if you want to find joy, that joy almost always comes through it doesn't mean you can't be joyful just on your own, but we kind of learn that through our interconnectedness with other people. Like we're not meant to just be alone and
Yeah.
wallowing in our stuff. We're meant to share. When I share these things with you, it lightens that load. And I don't live in fear. There's nothing about me today. I can say this in all honesty. There's not a single thing about me that I haven't said out loud to another human being. Now, some of them may not be publicly to the world, although most of them are.
Mm.
But like, I'm not burdened by somebody finding out something about me that's suddenly gonna like be that thing that if they knew that they wouldn't like me anymore. Like I like to wear those things, on my right here where everybody can see, and it encourages other people
Yeah.
to express themselves and realize that their own shame, their own insecurities, all of these things that are keeping them in the dark are actually, uh, the things that if they share it with other people will create a fellowship that will be lifelong.
Yeah. Well, I want to reveal something personal now, and I'm going to wear it right here. Um, I tend to isolate. I have this push-pull relationship with connection. I want it, I need it, and I'm afraid of people. So, and socially awkward, and it surprises a lot of people. I've learned how to manage it, and the isolation, I think, leads to all of those addictions and crutches. So part of my commitment now, and I'm working on it with my coach, is to reach out more to friends. And I just found Five Rhythms Dance in Los Angeles. It's something that I've always been pulled to, and I haven't been for a year or two. I had to hunt them down, find it. I showed up yesterday, and for 2 hours just moved free form, no alcohol, no nothing, and made some lovely connections. We stood around and we held hands at the end, and we each spoke a word, and people really welcomed me. And it was a lovely experience. And I know, my brain knows, David, you have to keep doing that, not just going to acting class, but find the dance, or maybe contact improv, or something where people are truly connecting and relating. So it's great timing that we're
Beautiful.
talking about this. Yeah,
Yeah, thank
connection.
you for that. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
how often do we leave something like you clearly had a great experience, but we leave things like that often wondering what other people think of us. Like my grandmother used to say, what other people think of you isn't any of your business.
Right.
And
Right.
and we live in fear that like somehow they are talking about us once we leave, as if, and the funny part about that is that's our ego talking, as if other people are actually talking about us when we leave the room. Nobody's talking about us, or if they are, it's it's for a short second, and like they're not going home and spending the rest of their day thinking about us. Yet our brains worry that that's what's happening, that somehow we've,
Yeah.
embarrassed ourselves, or it's just it's that kind of thinking that keeps us stuck in these
Yeah.
places of not growing beyond. And I'm the guy who sits on an airplane and like I talk to the person in the seat next to me, because I'm more. Now, it doesn't mean I don't have a book ready in case I realize very quickly that maybe I don't want to talk to that person. But
Right. Yeah.
I
Have an
don't
out.
ever want to. Yeah, I don't want to miss an opportunity to make a connection with somebody that might very well change my life, and I might change theirs. And sometimes, like words said to us by a stranger in passing can change the entire course of our lives. And
Yeah.
I love thinking that. I love like thinking, who am I going to meet today?
Man,
And
I could
you
see us
know,
out on, I could see us out on the street. We'd have a good time. I just said to a stranger this morning in the elevator, um, I think you're going to have a really good day today. I've never said that to anyone. It just came out. So yeah, outreach. Charlie, I'm
yeah,
loving this. Look, before we go to your fundraiser and tell people where they can go to donate money for recovery, um, out of the stories of spending a year or two in prison and being speaking on the USS Carl Vinson carrier, or speaking at NATO, is there a story there that you'd like to tell, and a nugget from that?
yeah. And I thanks for asking. I'll keep it brief. The prison thing, it's easier for people just to either you can listen to my book on Audible, or you're welcome to buy it. But without going into the details of that, I end up in
Well,
federal
hang on. What's the
prison.
name of is it
Yeah.
Running the Sahara, or is another
Yeah,
book?
it's actually Running Man. It's Running Man. Simon and Schuster published my memoir a few years ago, which has been awesome. And it's called Running Man, but it has very little to do with running.
Great. Get the book,
And it's
guys. Running Man. I
yeah,
assume it's on
yeah,
Amazon. It's on,
it
wherever you
is.
get books. Running Man by Charlie Engle. Go and
And
get
I
that
do
book and
read
have a
the
listen.
audiobook. Right. I do read the audiobook, so which was a fun experience. But it's about, it's a journey book, and it's not a drunkalog. You know, I'm sober by page 70, and I get on with many of my adventures. But you know, through something that was very controversial and no fault of my own, I end up in federal prison at 19 years clean and sober. And I became the only person in the US to be charged with overstating my income on a home loan application.
Yeah.
And that was during the mortgage crisis. And it's a pretty ridiculous story, but without focusing on that piece, I end up in federal prison for a year and a half. And the nugget here I think that could be useful is very quickly I realized that, you know, fair or unfair in that situation really didn't matter. Like I was going to be there for a year and a half, and my happiness and who I was going to be in that situation was still completely up to me. And there's a premise that I learned in addiction recovery from my very first sponsor almost 30 years ago. And it was this simple statement: to keep it, you have to give it away. And my focus in prison became on my own running again. So I ran every day. I got made fun of. I did yoga. I did stuff that, you know, I became this sort of weird middle-aged white dude in a prison with 500 guys. And what happened though, the transformation was amazing because by the time I left a year and a half later, I had 50 guys running with me every single day. I had 25 guys doing yoga with me on the softball field a
Oh
few
my
days a
God.
week. And like, but I never one time went to them, to any of them, and said, "Hey, why don't you come join me? You know, you look like you could lose a few pounds." Like that's not a great idea in federal prison anyway. But like instead, I just did it, and people got a chance to see it. Like there's nowhere to go in prison, so you know they saw my life actually being a little better than theirs in there, and consequently, they'd come up and say, "Hey, can you teach me how to run?" And so to keep it, you have to give it away. So my way through that experience was to share this gift I had of being a runner. And I had 10 guys that lost more than 100 pounds that were working out with me every single day. And like it, I know for sure I didn't change their life. They changed their own life. But I laid the foundation for telling them that they had the ability to do this thing. And you know, and it's a lesson I keep with me every single day. It is why every time I get on a stage, you know, whether it's with Deepak Chopra or Tony Robbins or anybody else, I share all of my story, because the last thing I want is for somebody to like Google me and say, "Oh well, you know, this guy didn't talk about prison." Like I'm not embarrassed about prison. What happened to me was unfair, but how many unfair things happen to all of us in life, like every day? You know, we don't get the job, we lose the relationship, we whatever it is. I mean, a lot of times it is literally unfair. It's because of some back room shenanigans, and somebody else knew somebody and they got the gig that we were supposed to get. Hey, that's life. And like you got to figure out how you're going to turn that into a positive lesson. And I don't recommend federal prison as the path for anybody, but you should avoid that if you can. But I left there a much better person than when I went in.
You heard it here, listeners. Your happiness is up to you, regardless of your circumstances. So if you find that you're throwing a pity party for yourself, whatever it is, might be your body and you don't like those circumstances. It might be your living situation or where you live or your income, or you're not tall enough, or you're single, or whatever it is, or your business isn't thriving. If you're throwing a pity party, your happiness is up to you, regardless of your circumstances. And man, I love that story about the prison. Is very Forrest Gump, isn't it? He's just doing his thing. He's just focused on his thing. And people like, oh, hey, check that out. You know, let me see what that's about. Where can people tell us about your fundraiser as we wrap this up for a landing? I
Yeah.
just mix my metaphors. And where can people go to donate?
Yeah, so what's coming up, depending on if this podcast comes before July 23rd, which I realize is only several days from now,
I
I
think it
am
will.
running. Okay, I'm running for 30 hours to celebrate, as my son will point out, he's like, Dad, you realize running for 30 hours doesn't like prove good mental health. You understand that, right? I'm like, okay, I get it. It's not for everybody. But I'm doing it to celebrate my 30 years clean and sober. And I'm doing it at Ashley Addiction Treatment Center in Maryland. This is the name of it. It's actually called the Penguin. And you can see it says on my shirt here, Movement for Recovery. And I'm a huge advocate in this idea of physical movement. Get a sweat going. You know, forget about your middle school PE teacher that used running as a punishment and made you hate like running, because running is not what you hate. Like it's a great way as an outlet. Running may not be your thing. Walking, biking, yoga, breath work, whatever it is. But my celebration will be July 23rd and 24th. I'm raising money for Ashley and their addiction research department in conjunction with Johns Hopkins. So we're doing some very high level research into ways that we can improve long-term outcomes. But the other part of the money is going to scholarships for people who can't afford treatment. And there's a lot of those. So you can find on my website, which is just charlieengle.com, all my social media links. Instagram is the one I use the most. So I would say follow me on Instagram. You can go into the link in my bio there and you can find all the details for Ashley Addiction Treatment Center and the Penguin. And if you want to join, you can actually, for $20, you can join virtually. Register virtually, and wherever you are in the world, all you're saying is at sometime on July 23rd and 24th, I'm going to get out and move my body for 30 minutes or 3 miles or whatever your thing might be. And everybody on this podcast listening, you either are someone who struggled with substance addiction, you have a family member or close friend who struggled, you have a coworker who struggled, you've probably lost someone to addiction. You probably know someone who didn't survive this issue. And so no one escapes it. Like, we all know what I'm talking about. And COVID has just like poured gasoline on it and lit it on fire. I mean, addiction rates, overdose deaths, fentanyl is a hellish drug that has changed the whole world in a negative way. And like, we're in a mess, and there needs to be greater services for people in the mental health space.
Totally agree. So listeners, go to thepenguinevents.com. That's plural. Thepenguinevents.com. Follow Charlie. Donate. I've donated already to this cause. It's a wonderful cause. Charlie Engle, such a joy to connect with you again and dive into your life and get to know you a bit more.
I really appreciate it, David. I look forward to keeping in touch, and hopefully we get to do this again sometime soon.
You've been listening to Extraordinary Focus with David Wood. Now, to achieve way more in less time, to double your business and your impact in the world, and to be an even more extraordinary entrepreneur and human, make sure you get your gift basket. It includes a cheat sheet to double your focus, a short video to implement the steps, and a free focus audit to identify the #1 focus leak in your business and how to plug it. To get all 3 of these goodies, just go to myfocusgift.com. If you've gotten value out of this episode, tell your friends. And nothing says keep up the good work, David, like a review, which helps us climb in the rankings and reach more listeners. Now, let's be extraordinary.